Hey, this is a tutorial on how to add custom textures to your custom Mordhau map. I'm assuming you've already learned how to make a Mordhau map and load it into Mordhau. If you want to learn how to do that, you can look in the description and find a link there. Anyway, this is the map that I'm going to be adding the texture to as a floor and a big wall, and this wall is where I want to put my texture in. So let's jump in the editor. So here's my map, and the first step will be to close the editor because we're going to be importing assets into the project as we did when we first set up the Mordhau custom map assets, and the editor has to be closed in order to import those. So here's the zip that you will need to download. The link is in the description. This zip has two assets in it. There's one material in a very specific folder that's important. This is a material that already exists in Mordhau, which is why this technique works, because we're using existing materials. And there's one texture that this material uses, so it looks right in the editor too. To install this is very simple. We just need to drag this folder into our project folder, just as we did before. When we first set up our project, in the content folder, we're going to add this Mordhau folder, and that's going to put the material in all the right places. So now we can actually open the editor again and set up our custom materials. So now I have the assets that I need to start creating my custom materials. But before I create them, I need some place to store them. And it's actually important where you keep your custom assets. So really you could put them anywhere you want in your project. But if you want the assets to be stored in the same folder as your map in the Mordhau installation folder, then it has to be in a very specific folder. That folder is going to be in the Mordhau folder. Go into Maps and create a new folder for your map, and this has to be the same name as your map name, in which case, for my case, it's a tutorial map. So with that created, I will create another folder and call that assets. You can call this map whatever you want. I prefer assets. And I'm also going to create folders for my textures and my materials. Right, so before we actually make the material, I'm going to import some custom textures to use. And I've already prepared some textures that I want to use. This nice looking cobblestone wall. And I'm just going to drag that into the textures folder. Now that I have my textures ready, I can finally create the material. We don't want to make a normal material, we want to make a material instance of the Mordhau material that we just imported. So let's open that up. We set the parent to the material that we imported. You can search for simple and it should pop up. And this is the material that we want. So if we look at the material that we have a pretty weird looking rock. These are just the default textures, and we're going to be overriding these textures. And that's pretty simple to do. You just check the parameters that you want to override. These are all the parameters you can set. Let's start with the albedo texture. Search for our own texture. We'll override the normal as well. And the roughness. All right, so now we have our material ready to use. There's some other options you can play with. You have scale texture here, so you can tile your texture. I'm not going to do it in this case. You can also apply different colors to your texture. So I believe you enable color multiply and you set a color, and then you set the color lerp or color modulate. Yeah, there you go. So we got a red color. I'm going to stick with just a regular color. Let's save that and go back into our project. So now we have a material that we can actually use. And we can just drag that onto our wall. Not a very pretty texture, but it'll have to do. So let's save our map and make sure we save all our assets. And we're ready to cook. So now the cook is finished, and I'm going to copy paste that into our Mordhau folder. So copy paste the map as you normally would. You might notice that the assets folder is missing, and that's because the assets folder is in Mordhau maps and right in here. So you have to copy paste these two folders separately. So we'll start with just the map, and then the assets folder. And now we're ready to test in game. Let's open it up. And there's our custom texture.